It's a common sense recap of the big stories. It's Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
Andy McCarthy, former assistant U.S. attorney. He was there in the Southern District of New York. Andy, you have written some blockbuster stuff. It's making headlines everywhere, and we're thrilled to have you here. You talk about the timing of this sentencing. This is on the the business fraud trial. Judge Marchand in New York, the 34 felony counts, coming up September 18th. Talk about what you think. You actually think that he may, say that he should be sentenced to house arrest or prison? I mean, this is wild.
I think, Rita, it's going to be a prison sentence and not necessarily an insubstantial one. I think, you could get a 2 or 3 year prison sentence. And let me explain why I think that. First of all, this has been a political exercise from the beginning. The sentence on September 18th is 2 days after early voting begins in Pennsylvania, which I think everybody acknowledges may be the decisive state in the election. So I don't think it's any accident that that's happening. And I think the thing that people need to recognize, and this is kind of a perverse incentive, but it's not like President Trump is going to jail. He's going to get bail pending appeal, and the appeal is going to take a couple of years or more to work out. So it's not like he sentences him to prison and you hear the cuffs get put on him and he gets carted off to Rikers Island. That's not going to happen. What they want is to be able to say in the run-up to the election that he's a convicted felon facing a stiff prison sentence, because they think that will have an impact on undecided voters. And I think it's a freebie. The incentive for Judge Marchand is to impose a more significant sentence precisely because it's not going to be carried out. It's just play acting. If he was really sending Trump to prison, and that might have a consequence for the election, it might get people in the electorate upset and angry, then I think he probably would not impose a prison sentence. But let's remember, the district attorney's office presented this case to the jury not as a business records case. They said it was a conspiracy to steal the presidency in the election of 2016, which was successful. I don't think you could say that Trump, by their lights, stole the most important political office on the planet and then say, so what's that worth? 16 hours of probation? I mean, are you kidding? They treated this like it was the crime of the century. They can't not impose a prison sentence after that.
You know, it's interesting, Andy McCarthy, you just brought up the reasoning behind that. But given that, people will still be, even if it's not instituted, even if Judge Marchand, who seems to be, I agree with you, incredibly political, I think he should have absolutely should have recused himself just based on his own background and also his daughter's background, who was doing deals with Kamala Harris. I mean, there's some real big stuff there. But regardless, don't you think that politically people will still go, wait a minute, this is still, look how close it is to the election. And even if there isn't actual jail or prison time, just the thought of sentencing a former president and potentially future president, that's huge implications. That's not light.
Rita, I think it's possible that I'm overthinking this, but here's what I think. I think that if he doesn't actually send him to prison, that what we're talking about, as opposed to sentence him to prison, where he pronounces a sentence, but it's actually not going to be carried out. I think as far as the case generally is concerned, that people who are animated by it and closely followed it have already made up their minds. And what is consequential for the next 6 to 8 weeks is the political messaging to the diminishing pool of people who haven't made up their minds yet. And those people who didn't follow this case closely, what they're going to come away knowing is that Trump got convicted of a bunch of felony counts and a judge thought it was serious enough to send him to prison. And I don't see how that can possibly help him.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it helps him, although sometimes it seems like when this political lawfare happens, it does seem to help him in the polls because people see through it. But I hear what you're saying. Gov Patterson.
I had thought, Andy, that Mershon was considering stepping aside and letting someone else do it and just let it float through the rest of the year, which would actually be fair because you don't want the sentence to necessarily affect the election.
Yeah, Governor, I think two things about that. First, he's denied the recusal motion yet again this week, so I don't think he's going to step aside. He sounds like a guy who's intending to keep on the case, and that's too bad because I think a good judge would not need to be told to recuse himself under the circumstances that Rita just described. A good judge would say, for the integrity of the proceeding, I'm going to step out and let somebody who doesn't have my baggage handle it. But this judge didn't do that. The second thing is the case should be, at the very least, put off until after the election because there's a live immunity issue in it now. The district attorney's office in the case used a good deal of evidence that involved official acts that President Trump took during the presidency. And
by the way, Judge Weinberg's jumping out of his skin here. Go ahead.
Andy, but he's already indicated that two days before the sentencing, 2 days before, he's going to rule on immunity. He's already said that, Andy.
Yeah, but Judge, here's why I'm concerned about that. I think he's saying now that he's going to rule on immunity the 16th and then sentence on the 18th. Two things we can deduce from that. One is, why schedule the sentencing if
you know he's going to deny it?
Right, he's going to deny it.
Of course.
That's number one. But number two, then why schedule this for the 16th? I think it's because he doesn't want to give Trump
time to appeal.
Yeah, God forbid somebody get an opportunity to do that.
Well, the thing is, Rita, an immunity issue is different from other kinds of issues, as the Supreme Court pointed out in its immunity decision. It goes to whether you should be having the proceeding in the first place. And what the Supreme Court has basically said is if you have a plausible immunity claim, you should be allowed to litigate that fully, including any appeals, before anything else happens in the case.
So why is it not happening, Andy? Because that's absolutely right. That's what they said. It was done by the Supreme Court.
Yeah, so
why
it seems completely un-American.
Because Mershon doesn't care. He has a political objective here. That's why.
Ed Cox, real quick.
How was the 18th pick? You're right. It starts right. 18th appears right after the start of early voting in a crucial state of Pennsylvania. How did he pick that date?
Oh, gee, I don't know.
Must be a coincidence.
Exactly.
Look, this whole thing, the case is a farce. It's the kind of conduct that in New York, where a lot of very serious crime doesn't get prosecuted, or certainly doesn't get prosecuted as seriously as it should. The thought that they, brought this case, no one other than Trump would have been charged this way. And they didn't represent it to the jury as what it was charged in the indictment. They said it was a conspiracy to steal the election. I used to think being an election denier was a bad thing. I guess it depends on which election you deny. But, what the jury was told was this was a conspiracy to steal the presidency and that it worked.
Right.
So, I just think this entire thing was done for purposes of messaging in connection with the stretch run of the 2024 presidential election. And I don't think Trump should figure he's going to get any satisfaction from Judge Mershon. I think
how sad is that, Andy?
They're going to need to go into federal court and say, look, we're entitled to litigate this immunity claim until it's decided. And certainly there shouldn't be a sentence imposed until that's done. We'll see if if they take me up on that.
Yeah,
that's certainly a way for him to win.
Yeah, but that's still a long way down the road, unfortunately. And you got the election right around the corner. Wow. Andy McCarthy, thank you. Really great to have you here.
Welcome
thank you,
back.
Andy.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.